Empanadas or empanadas?
Empanadas, and they have different names. So empanadas is I think the more, it's a widely used in different countries. But the region of Puerto Rico where I'm from, we call them empanadillas. And then they are also called pastelillos in some parts of Puerto Rico. But empanadas, that's how you pronounce it.
Hi, I'm Sabina. Today we're making empanadas from Puerto Rico. Muslims around the world are celebrating the month of Ramadan. I think it's a great opportunity to showcase the beautiful diversity of Muslim communities around the world. So today we're starting with empanadas, a recipe from Puerto Rico. I had the pleasure to talk to author Wendy Diaz.
My name is Wendy Diaz. I was born in Puerto Rico and spent about half my childhood there. I came to the US when I was 8 or 9. And my father was in the military, so we moved around quite a bit. At 20 years old, I decided to embrace Islam. When I first converted, since I converted in the States, I was thinking that I must be the only Puerto Rican Muslim, but it turned out not to be the case. Eventually, I met Puerto Ricans here in the US. In Puerto Rico, there are thousands of Muslims, thousands of Muslim families. The majority are immigrant families, and especially from Palestine. And they established themselves in Puerto Rico because they couldn't migrate to the US during the times of conflict, and in other parts of Latin America as well.
Going back to your book and your recipe, why empanadas?
So I have a surprise for you. Since we were doing this interview, I made some.
I'm super excited about this because I've never made, unfortunately, empanadas before. So let's get cooking.
Right. So fast forward after 4 years, I meet my husband, who's also a Latino convert. His family is from Ecuador, South America. We got married and we decided that if we have children, inshallah, we're going to teach them, or we're going to speak to them in Spanish only at home, because we want to preserve that bilingualism in our home. And then, of course, incorporate Arabic. So we wanted to make it a very multilingual experience for our children. And we wanted to teach them about Islam in their language. But when we started searching for literature about Islam in our language, we couldn't find anything. And that kind of just prompted a search, frantic search for literature. We, I think, got a hold of 2 books that came from Ecuador, my husband's home country. And those were the only 2 Spanish books. I mean, even we reached out to brothers and sisters in Spain, and even they said, we don't have anything in Spanish. And it was just so, I mean, bizarre, because you have so many, millions of Muslims, honestly, in Latin America, spread all over. And then, of course, in Spain and in northern Morocco, there are Spanish speakers there. So to not have any literature for children, it was just something that I found completely strange. So I started reaching out to different publishing companies that produce children's literature about Islam in English, and I offered to translate their children's books. But most of them, either they didn't answer back or they said they weren't interested. And what I was getting to was there is no market for Spanish books about Islam. And I couldn't believe it. So I hit a roadblock and I decided I already had a background in Spanish education and in writing. And so I just decided to take matters into my own hands and start writing books, so that at least I could have something for my kids. But I had other friends who were Latino Muslims, and once they saw what I was doing, they said, we want them too. So then I started to produce more, along with my husband's help, of course. And so we started off with 1 book, 2 books, and then eventually had close to 10 books. And then in 2020, I published Eid Empanadas. That was my first middle grade chapter book. And the reason, what inspired that book is that, yes, we wanted more literature that was in Spanish or bilingual that included the Spanish language, but then we also realized that there's a lack of representation of Latino Muslims in Islamic literature. So you don't see Hispanic characters, you don't see Caribbean characters or things like that. So we wanted to do something to kind of fill that gap. So that's where this idea for the Eid Empanadas book came from, and also taking from some of the experiences that my children went through, going to Islamic schools and even public schools, and being a minority within a minority here in the US.
So And I also love how you talk about adapting to cultures, keeping alive your Latin American culture while also being a Muslim. So can you talk about that, because that's something that's fascinating, and that's
Mhm.
something that's also empowering to migrant kids, whoever they are and wherever they are, I find.
Right. When my family and I moved to the US from Puerto Rico, I started experiencing very unpleasant encounters with Americans who didn't appreciate that we spoke Spanish, or that we were different. So, for example, my mother and I remember clearly we were in a supermarket and we were speaking to each other in Spanish. And my mother used to be embarrassed and she tried to speak in English, but she obviously didn't know the language. So, and I would stop her and tell her, don't speak to me in English because we speak Spanish. So just speak to me in Spanish and don't worry about it. This is me as a little girl telling my mother this. And then we eventually got to the counter where we're paying for the food that we were buying. And I'm still speaking to my mother in Spanish. And the lady at the counter said, very rudely, excuse me, can you speak in English? And it was just like, I turned around and I said, I'm talking to my mom. We speak Spanish. We're not talking to you. Because if we were talking to you, we'd be speaking to you in English. And of course, my mom's embarrassed. But I've always felt that drive to try to preserve that self-preservation, I guess, you're in this new place, but you don't want to give up on your identity, and you shouldn't have to. Right here in the US, there are people from all kinds of places, all kinds of backgrounds, and we should not feel ashamed, and no one should shame us for being who we are and for speaking our language. Actually, it's an advantage to speak more than one language. It's unfortunate that here in the West, in some countries, they only speak one language. This book has been, I think, the most impactful and the most well-received book. It was like a runner-up in a Bookstagram Awards, and people really appreciate the book, I think, because of that, immigrant experience, and then also getting to know what it's like as a Latino Muslim to live in a Muslim community where you are really invisible. And I say invisible, why? Because many of us, we look like we're Arabs, we could look South Asian, we could look African, because Latinos are just a mixture of all kinds of cultures. So when we go into the Muslim community, when we go into the masjid, we just blend in, and people assume, oh, this is an Arab person, this is an African person, this is a this is a South Asian person. And so no one comes to you and says, where are you from? And then when they do ask, when I am asked, where are you from? And I tell them I'm from Puerto Rico, there's this like shock, like, and they'll tell me I've never met anyone that's Muslim from Puerto Rico or from any Latin American country. So they're fascinated, but I keep telling people, we're all around, you just don't notice. So people appreciate seeing these characters, this family in this book, because they can finally kind of get that perspective, like what it's like. It's been a learning experience to kind of teach my family little by little what Islam is about, and then tell them about our holidays. And I think at first there was some shyness about it. Obviously Ramadan is you have to make it known, because you're telling everyone, like my mom, I'm fasting. What does that mean? What do you mean by that? I can't eat anything, I can't drink anything. And so it just starts up this whole conversation. So it's just been, I think, alhamdulillah, I'm fortunate to have a very understanding family who doesn't mind, the holidays. And they've actually now they give my children gifts for Eid, and they also sometimes send for their holidays. So my kids are not
They have
complaining,
to.
because they're getting they're getting double the gifts, right? So I think it's beautiful that we have a blended family in that sense, a religiously blended family. Yeah, definitely. We still eat the same foods. We still, we develop our own style within, the halal framework of Islam, right? Because Islam is easy, it's flexible. It doesn't come to take away your culture. Empanadas to me has always been a Ramadan favorite. And I love samosas. And I say that this is the Puerto Rican samosa, the Spanish version. And there is a different type of dumpling in every culture, I think. So this is like a dumpling, a fried, for us it's fried. We can also bake it. So it's an important staple in our country. And we can stuff it with cheese, chicken, ground beef or pulled beef. It can be sweet, it can be savory. Because for us, it's definitely a favorite. And then also the crescent shape. I mean, you can't deny it. I think it's just the perfect Ramadan and Eid food.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for your recipe and for your time, and for illustrating perfectly how migrants maintain their cultural identity with food. We will see a lot more of that in the coming videos, so if you're interested, please do subscribe.